General Manager Joe Schoen spoke to the media on Tuesday. We have our top 5 takeaways from that presser. That's coming up next on the LockedOn Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is presented by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. Pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 10 times the amount of your money on your entry. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code LOCKEDON at sign-up. That's prizepicks.com, promo code LOCKEDON. Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On podcast family, your team every day. My name is Patricia Traina, and it is Wednesday, November 2nd. Gosh, we're already into November already, which means the holiday season's not too far off. And on today's show, we are going to talk about key takeaways, my 5 top takeaways from Giants General Manager Joe Schoen's press conference, which was held yesterday. Now, there was a lot of stuff covered within the first 20-minute presser. Schoen was fantastic. I don't know if you guys had a chance to watch the video on Giants.com or, listen to it, but I thought he was really good with his answers. I thought he was very forthcoming and some interesting stuff there to kind of give you some insight. And, I have to say, before I get into my list of top 5 takeaways, when Schoen talks, you kind of get the feeling that he's being straight with you. He's not giving you, like GM speak or, any kind of double talk. He's being as straight as he can be without being too revealing. For example, he was asked, which player was he contacted for that he said was a hard no, and he wouldn't say who it was, although I think everybody could figure out who it was. A certain running back who wears number 26. Just my guess, by the way. But I just thought Schoen was really fantastic, and I'm really excited to dive into these top 5 takeaways. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the takeaways, and then I'm going to give you my opinion, my take, and what I think is going to come of it. For each one. So that is on today's show. Again, happy to have you with us on today's episode of Locked On Giants. Let's get into it. All right. So takeaway number 1 is he is open to doing contract extensions this year. Now, Schoen said that he and Brian Daboll and the rest of the team would get together this week and they would look to see what they could get done, if they could get anything done this, by Monday. And he said if he can't get anything done, then he was going to cut everything off until after the season so that it wouldn't be a distraction to the player or to the team. Now, when I first heard that, I'm going to be honest with you. When I first heard that, I thought, Joe, how are you going to get this done when you don't have money to do it? And I started playing around with some contract numbers for different guys. And I think there's a way to make it work, and I'm going to put that together. I actually started it for an article that I'm going to post on Giants Country, and if I can, what I'll do is I'll try and talk about it here on the show once that article's up, if I can do it without, the benefit of the charts and whatnot. But let's talk about the guys that he's open to extending. Obviously, the top 2 would be Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley. I do not think those 2 are going to be extended or even, I don't think Shane's going to even go to their reps and talk about an extension. I just don't see it happening because I don't think the Giants have the cap space to do it. So, in thinking about it, it's probably going to have to be someone who's not going to cost a whole ton of money against the salary cap. So a couple names that came to mind included punter Jamie Gillen, who shouldn't really cost a whole lot against the cap. And defensive back Julian Love was another guy that I thought, that's a free agent that they'll probably want to, get back or get on board sooner than later. So those were a couple of names that he mentioned. Um, I think another person that I wrote about or mentioned would have been Nick Gates. But in thinking about it, Nick Gates is just back from the PUP list and that serious leg injury. So it might be a little too premature to do Nick Gates. And Nick Gates is probably someone they could get done anyway going forward, even into the offseason. But Gillian and Julian Love would be the two I would think Shane is going to maybe look to extend if he can. Now, let's talk about this for a second here. Why not Daniel Jones and why not Saquon Barkley? After the season ends, the Giants, like any other team, as long as they're not in the playoffs, they can begin signing guys, future free agents, futures, reserve future contracts. So that means, they can start to swell the salary cap space. And they have until the start of the new league year to get under the salary cap, whatever this new salary cap is. So the way I see it kind of playing out is that if Daniel Jones continues to play well, and he has played well despite, last week in Seattle where, he had his moments where you just were like, huh? What I think will happen is that Shane will probably want to get Daniel done before the start of free agency next year. And the reason for that is if he can get Daniel done before then, now he can use the franchise tag, if need be, on Saquon Barkley. And the reason why you would want to do it in that order is because it's going to cost them far less to put the franchise tag on Saquon than it would on Daniel. So to me, it makes sense that you wait until the end of the season. Okay, you go through these last 9 games, whatever it is, see how Daniel does, see how Saquon does. These are going to be 2 big contracts if the Giants execute them. So you don't want to rush into them. You want to be sure that these guys are what you think they are. And so I think that's what the Giants are going to do. So just getting back now to Gillian and Julian Love, those are 2 guys I think the money will work. Julian Love, actually, we talk about the salary cap. And as I record this, the Giants have just a sneeze under 3 million left. I think it's something like 2.9 million of cap space. And Shane did say they're going to probably have to redo another contract. And I keep looking up and down that list and I say, where are you going to get the money from? If you're not going to touch Kenny Galladay's contract, which, by the way, I'll talk about in a second because he did mention Kenny Galladay, and I'll mention that in a second. But if you don't want to touch that contract because you want to get out of it next year, where else are you going to pull from? Julian Love is a possibility. And I'm going to break that down. I started working on it before I started taping this, so I don't have the exact numbers, but I think it'll work. And I'll have to play around with it. And I'll have that up on Giants Country if you want to check that out. I think it should have that ready for you by tomorrow, or actually by today. It should be up. So at some point today, you should be able to find that. Now let's talk about Kenny Galladay for a second, because Shane did say that Galladay should be ready to go, fingers crossed, by the time the Giants have to play the Houston Texans, which is the game they play coming out of the bye week. Now, this is just a crazy thought. I don't think this is going to happen, but you can't discount it. And I'm going to put it out there for what it's worth. Kenny Galladay last week, after Kadarius Toney was traded, really sounded motivated and seemed like a fire had been lit under his butt. So here's a crazy, crazy thought. What if Galladay and whatever, issues he might have had physically, mentally, whatever was weighing him down, what if he comes back and balls out the rest of the year? I mean, I know it sounds crazy, and at this point, we can't really expect it. And in all likelihood, they will move on from him. But you have to take that into consideration. What if? So now if you're the Giants, do you say, all right, you know what, Kenny? You seem to get your act together. We'll consider keeping you next year. Because next year, even to cut him, the savings isn't that great. So it's a scenario. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I still say Kenny Galladay is not going to be on this team next year, but you never know. Stranger things have happened. So it's something you have to take into consideration. And if that's the case, if Kenny Golladay does come back and does play like they expect him to, guess what? They could get a lot of money from redoing that contract and just kind of, spreading it out a little bit. And that's something I'm going to try and take a look at as well. There's a bunch of contracts I've got to take a look at and see if I could put some numbers that make sense together. So, just another thing on my list of to-dos, which I, of course, will do. I'll have that on Giant Country. It's just easier to put it on Giants Country because you could see the charts and the numbers and all and the math and all that stuff. So that's probably where I'll put that content once it's ready. So that was takeaway number one. That was a big one for me because when he said he was open to doing extensions, like I said, the first thought I had was, what money are you going to use to do these extensions? And so again, once I started looking at it, it kind of made sense. All right, the next thing that kind of jumped out at me, and it really shouldn't because look, Shane's going to do due diligence. So at this point, I don't think he's going to sit there and say that any player that might be out there that might be able to help the team is off the table. I don't think he's going to do that. So when the topic of Odell Beckham Jr. came up, Shane was very, complimentary of Beckham, said that, if he's healthy, he's certainly somebody that they would want to talk to. So, not a surprise. I did not expect Shane to come out and say, nah, sorry, that ship has sailed. We're not interested. But here's the thing. I suspect Shane was being polite. And I'll say this because, Beckham is a great player, has a lot of talent, but he's coming off 2 ACLs, all right, including the one that he suffered last year. He has reportedly expressed wanting a nice contract. If you're the Giants, wouldn't you rather spend the resources in the draft on a younger receiver who has less of an injury history and more of a long-term future than on a guy that has 2 ACL surgeries and who was on the wrong side of 30? I mean, to me, it just makes sense. Now, that being said, if Odell is willing to come in and, not ask for the sun, moon, and the stars, kind of like what Landon Collins did, then why not have a reunion? I could see that certainly being the case, but I'm not so sure it's a realistic possibility. I think some team is going to give Odell the contract he's wanting. I do not think it's going to be the Giants. Would I like it to be the Giants? Sure, why not? I have nothing against Odell. He was a fun player to watch, brought a lot of fans a lot of joy, but I just don't think realistically that that's the direction they're going to go in. All right, Giant fans, I've got 3 more key takeaways that I want to talk about, and I'll give you my reaction and thoughts about these takeaways from the Joe Schoen press conference on Tuesday. We'll have a couple more right after this. Hey, Giant fans, home burglaries and intruder breaches are unfortunately on the rise, especially during the holiday season. Don't let the bad guys win. Build up your best defense with a customized system from SimpliSafe. Used and trusted by thousands of people, SimpliSafe is cutting-edge technology powered by 24/7 professional monitoring agents who always have your back. SimpliSafe's agents call you the moment a threat is detected and will even dispatch the appropriate first responders to your residence, even if you're not home. So don't risk your family's safety. Put SimpliSafe's 24/7 professional monitoring and advanced response technology to work for you today. Visit simplisafe.com/LockedOnNFL to customize your system at a special listener discount of 20% off. Plus, get your first month of interactive monitoring free. That's simplisafe.com/LockedOnNFL for your customized 20% discounted security system and free month of interactive monitoring. Hey, Giant fans, thanks for making the Locked On Giants podcast your first listen today. For your second listen today, please go check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I am Patricia Trainer, your host. We are talking about my 5 top takeaways from the Joe Schoen press conference on Tuesday. So we did a couple first segment. We're going to do a couple more this segment, and then one more in the next segment. Before I get into the next couple, coming up on tomorrow's Locked On Giants podcast, I'm going to have an interview for you. It's with a former NFL quarterback. I won't tell you who he is, but a former NFL quarterback. And no, it's not Eli Manning, for those of you who are wondering. But we're going to talk about Daniel Jones. So that is on tap for tomorrow's program. I'm still planning to do Locked On Live with Tana and Bad Dog. I just got to confirm the details and what time we're going to do it, but that is still in the cards. And I may have a bonus show for you, actually. I'm not sure if I'll do it over the weekend, but I'm supposed to be talking with an injury expert. So hopefully that show will come down and we'll be able to talk about some of these injuries that the Giants have had and what they need to do to kind of, get away from this injury prone, situation that they've had. So that's what's coming up on this bye week of Locked On Giants. Bye week, so no crossover, none of the usual stuff. We've got plenty of stuff that we're going to cover. So anyway, let us continue with some more thoughts. Shane was asked if the Giants' current way of winning is a sustainable formula. And for those who don't know what I'm talking about, basically the Giants have been getting off to a slow start and have been a come-from-behind fourth quarter whiz. I believe 5 of the 6 wins that they had, the Giants had to come from behind to win. And this was largely because, like I said, the slow starts, because, they have some deficiencies right now at receiver. They don't really have everything they need to just come out of the gate fast. And I think also part of that has to do with maybe the coaching kind of feeling things out a little bit in the beginning to see, how the opponent's going to play them. So I think that might have something to do with it as well. Shane was asked if that is a sustainable formula. And he kind of under his breath said, well, we're 6-2. So obviously, but in reality, it can be a sustainable formula, even though it's not an ideal formula. And here's why it can be sustainable. Brian Daboll, the head coach, has somehow gotten through to these players and taught them that when the chips are down, don't sit there and think, oh my God, here we go again. Think positively. Now, in the past, how many times do we see it during the dark years of the recent era of Giant football? We would see the Giants fall behind, and you would see guys sitting on the bench, their shoulders slumped, their heads down. You would see guys staring off. You would even see some guys starting to mail it in, make business decisions. And they just would give up. The body language screamed, I give up. You don't see that now with this Giants team. Daboll is a firm believer in, okay, what's done is done. Flush it and focus on the now. What can you control now? You can't go back and undo the past, but you can do something for the future. And as crazy as it sounds, that is something that can be sustainable. And the fact that these guys come in and they are prepared, they fight, and they are ready to go really speaks to the coaching. It speaks to the players as well for embracing that mindset. So I guess the big takeaway here is the loser mentality that was in that locker room for a number of years. And folks, it was in there. It's gone now. It's like these Giants, the chips are down and they just know, they believe in themselves and each other that they're going to be able to pull it out. And it's almost like, sometimes it's kind of like a David and Goliath type of situation where, you don't count on David to beat Goliath, but somehow he musters up the wherewithal to beat Goliath. So that's what it kind of reminds me of. And, Shane was very impressed by that. He was very complimentary of the coaching staff for that and the players who deserve the credit. I mean, it's not easy to get 53 guys plus however, 16 or however many practice squad guys, plus the guys that are on PUP and IR that are hanging around the locker room. It's not easy to get them all on the same page. And a former player once gave me a really good line. I'll tell it, I'll say it here. He said, at the end of the day, you want as many guys as possible taking the same cab home rather than every guy taking a separate cab home. And what he meant by that is you want everybody sharing in what's being done and buying into it. You don't want guys going off and doing their own thing. And I thought that was a very, very good statement. This is from a guy on the 2017, by the way. Player told me this. And, you go back and you look at some of the Giants winning teams, the Super Bowl teams that they had. And arguably, could you say that they were more talented than the teams that they beat to get to the Super Bowl? Probably not. But they did so because they believed in each other, they played for each other, they prepared, and they bought in. And at the end of the day, they all they bunched up and took the same cab or bus, in this case, home, as opposed to each guy taking individual cabs, which might have been the case again during the dark times of, the recent dark times of Giants football. So I thought that was a really, good answer. Now, realistically, you're going to say to yourself, yeah, but they can't really pass the ball deep. They can't do this. They can't do that. I get that. But that's going to come. And again, that's where the coaching comes in. The coaching is key. It has made a difference. This is a coaching staff that, they are teachers. But unlike last year's group that were teachers, this group somehow figures out ways to put guys in the best possible position to succeed. Some teachers don't go all the way. This group is. And that's a big difference. And that's why I believe Shane thinks that this formula that they have for winning is sustainable. All right. The next point I want to mention real quick. Kadarius Toney. Now, a lot of people are still confused. Why did the Giants give up on Kadarius Toney? What happened there? What was the story? Was he hurt? Was he not hurt? What was going on? Shane didn't shed any light into why it was the best decision for both parties. But usually when somebody says that, there was some kind of, there's usually some kind of disagreement where the two are not on the same page. Now, initially, when I spoke about this Kadarius Toney trade, I speculated whether perhaps Toney was doing something or not doing something that the Giants expected him to do. And I still believe that to be the case. I have no proof of it, but that's just my gut feeling. So, end of the day, that they decided they were better off without him. And it spoke volumes that they would trade away a talented receiver who, by the way, was healthy. More on that in a second, despite the fact that their receiving core is probably at best backups on other teams. Now, let's talk about the timing of the trade. Shane said that Toney was healthy enough to practice on Thursday. That week, he did not practice Wednesday. So first thing I thought when he said that was, okay, so he was healthy enough to practice Thursday, but not Wednesday. What's going on here? Well, the answer's right, is as obvious as the nose on my face. The Giants apparently were having discussions with the Kansas City Chiefs on Wednesday about potentially trading Toney. Had they put Toney out there to practice on Wednesday, and God forbid he had re-injured his hamstring or, I don't know, broke a fingernail or something like that, the deal would have been off. And the Giants would have been out 2 draft picks, a day 2 draft pick, which is the compensatory 3rd round pick they're getting from Kansas City, and a day 3 6th rounder, which the Giants did not have a 6th rounder. They had traded that away. So that kind of makes sense as to what, the timing behind the Kadarius Toney trade. And, they've moved on. They're not going to, rehash the story. But I'm curious to see how Tony makes out in Kansas City. Does he finally wise up? Does he finally, get on the field and do what he needs to take care of himself? We'll see. So that's where they stood, or that's kind of what happened, or the thinking behind the event, some of the events last week involving that Kadarius Toney trade, which I found interesting. Okay, I've got one more item on my list that I want to talk about. I will do that right after this. Hey, Giant fans, playing daily fantasy based on player projections has never been easier when you visit prizepicks.com. Pick 2 to 5 players, and if they go on to score more or less than their prize picks projection, you win up to 10 times the amount of your money on any entry. There's no competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. Prize Picks is currently operational in over 30 states and in Canada and offers projections on every sport. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less, and Prize Picks offers safe and fast withdrawals. So download the Prize Pick app today or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code LOCKEDON. Don't forget to enter that promo code LOCKEDON at sign up. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the LockedOn Giants podcast. I am Patricia Traina. We are doing my top 5 takeaways from Giants General Manager Joe Schoen's press conference. And it was a very, very good press conference, I thought. I mean, compared to, what we used to get from Dave Gettleman, this one, I just felt like better communication, a better flow, a little bit more honesty than maybe we had gotten, less deceit or trickery or whatnot, and just a mutual respect. So really, a good presser, I thought, by Joe Schoen, who's just really a likable guy. What you see is what you get with him. He is a likable guy. I've sat with him actually in the past and just, have a ton of respect for him. And I think he's really got this Giants team on the right track. So anyway, I've got one more thing on my list of 5 key takeaways, my 5 key takeaways from his presser. And for more takeaways, check out my article on Giants Country. You can see some more detail that I have on a few other things that didn't make the list, but are probably just as important. So you can check that out. This last one, and by the way, I didn't put these items in any particular order. I just kind of wrote them down as they came to mind. But in retrospect, if I had to order these from 1 being the most important to 5 being the least important, I probably would put this next one as number 1, the most important, because this is what a good general manager does. And what that is Schoen is not ruling out any position players for the draft and free agency. All right. So, for example, we all can sit here and say the Giants don't need a left tackle because they have Andrew Thomas. They don't need another edge rusher because they have Kayvon Thibodeau, and they'll have a healthy Azeez Ojulari at some point. They don't need a safety because they have Xavier McKinney. Well, you know what? Don't tell that to Joe Schoen, because Joe Schoen is looking at all positions. And that's a good thing. And here's why. Look at the Giants cornerback situation. Remember when James Bradbury was cut? Remember how we all were wringing our hands and we said, oh my God, what are they going to do now? They have a hole. This is why a good GM, regardless of what you have on the roster, you always look for the best available player, regardless of the position. All right. Ernie Accorsi did that. I don't know if you guys remember a few years ago. I think it was the year that they drafted, I want to say it was Matthias Kiwanuka. They drafted Matthias Kiwanuka, and they had something like 4 or 5 pass rushers already on that team. And everybody was like, why are you drafting another pass rusher when you have so many? Well, Kiwanuka later went on to help them win a Super Bowl. And he also filled in when guys were injured or when Michael Strahan, retired. So that's why. That's why you have that depth. So Shane, in his scouting process, revealed that every week he gets a list of top 10 players from his scouts. And what he does is he tries to get out to the college games to see each one of the top 10 players in person at some point. All right. So overall, the Giants have a list of their top 100, which is usually, the players you will find taken in rounds 1 through 3, depending on where they draft. Shane wants to get his eyes on all of them and not just on film. He wants to see them in person, which is a big, big difference as opposed to watching them on film. Yeah, you can tell about a player on film, but it's always good to see him, you know, in person. You can also see the demeanor on the sidelines, and you can see things that maybe the film doesn't tell you that are important when you are scouting and putting together the little fine points. So I thought that was pretty revealing. But to go along with that, Shane revealed something that the great Bill Parcells, the Hall of Fame head coach of the New York Giants, once said. And he said, you got to develop the younger players. If you're not developing the younger players, you're not doing your job. Now, you can go back in recent history. Certain head coaches, including Tom Coughlin, I'm afraid, just you got the sense that they didn't really want to play rookies right away, that they wanted to develop them first, maybe redshirt them wherever possible, give them an opportunity, to get acclimated to the NFL. That was kind of pushing, kicking the can down the road, so to speak. So then when injuries began to happen, guess what? Now you suddenly have to turn to these guys and, maybe they're not as ready as they could have been. And they probably can't help you like they should be able to help you had you really developed them and given them opportunities. So the philosophy of Shane and Brian Dable is, look, we have to be patient with these young guys. We're not expecting them to come out of college and be Hall of Famers or even Pro Bowlers. But our job as coaches, as teachers, is to get these guys up to snuff and get them ready to play so that if we need them for a specific role, if we need them to start, if we need them to go the distance, they will be ready. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you build up depth. Because think about this now for a second. If a player gets injured, let's say, actually, we have an example. Let's look at the offensive line. Evan Neal, the starting right tackle, injured. So they bring in Tyree Phillips, who, hasn't really played much. Bobby Johnson, Tony Sperano Jr., they get him ready to play. He steps in, and yes, he had the 2 false starts, but for the most part, he didn't play that badly last week. So this is what a good coaching staff does. This is why coaching is so important. And I just thought that, the combination of making sure you have adequate depth at as many positions as possible, regardless of what you have in front of that depth, and then developing it, so important to a winning recipe. And Shane mentioned, what they did up in Buffalo, how they took some of these young guys and they developed them, and now they're contributing to the Bills and their success that they're having. This is a part of a winning formula, folks. And this is a big difference between this coaching staff and prior coaching staffs. And this is why I think the Giants are in really good hands with Joe Schoen and Brian Dable. All right, Giant fans, that is going to do it for this episode of the LockedOn Giants podcast. Again, thank you for making us your first listen of the day, or if watching on YouTube, your first watch of the day. We're back tomorrow with, like I said, I'm going to have an interview for you with a former NFL quarterback. Topic is going to be Daniel Jones. And we'll also probably talk about Saquon and the Giants offense. So that's coming up tomorrow. Hope you'll tune in. Until then, have a great one, everybody.